90% of consumers read online reviews before visiting a business. What do people see when they look you up online? We give you the tools you need to take control of your reputation. Send surveys to your customers via text message with Testimonial Collector. Get 5-star reviews on all the major platforms like Google, Yelp, and more. Track what people are saying about your business with Reputation Manager. Respond to comments and turn negative reviews into happy customers. See what your competitors' customers are saying about them with Competition Tracker. Learn great marketing tactics and what it takes to stay on top. A bigger social presence means more connections. Automatically generate and schedule engaging social media posts with Social 365. Build trust, boost sales, and grow your business.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. You're tuning into the Entrepreneur Life Show, and I'm your host, Rose, founder of McDonald Bookkeeping Services. And I want to first thank everybody who is listening on one of their favorite podcast channels. Maybe you're watching on social media. If you're watching on YouTube, check us out, comment and chat on Super Chat. Make sure you like, subscribe. Tell us where you are tuning in from. If you are on Facebook, comment, like, tell us where you're tuning in from, and be sure to click that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. You're tuning into the Entrepreneur Life Show. Thanks everybody for tuning in once again and following us. We are so excited and appreciate you all the time, to all of our subscribers. I want to first start off by saying thank you to our sponsor, Marketing Out the Box, Sean Maddox, who has always been a great support to the show and is always getting our video content. He just helps so much. So if you want to think out the box and get your customers up and earn more revenue, definitely check out Sean Maddox, Marketing Out the Box. You can check that out on the bottom. Check out our website at entrepreneurlifeshow.com. Check out our YouTube channel, entrepreneurlifeshow.com, and you can see all the past guests, upcoming guests, as well as our calendar. So let's get started, and we're going to talk about who we're having on the show today, who I'm having. I'm very happy because, you know, I've had quite a bit of celebrities on the show and some really great businesses. You know, they've been in print, people have been in magazines and, you know, different types of shows that they've been in some type of notoriety. So they've done really great businesses and entrepreneurs, but we really haven't touched on Hollywood. And so because we have these celebrities and people who have been in magazines and on TV and on news, we have not touched on what really goes on getting into the entertainment industry, what really happens in Hollywood. And I found somebody that I'm really passionate about and excited about, that I know you guys are going to be happy about, that you will be able to connect with. And today's guest is Tim Tortora. I hope I said that right. So he has worked in Hollywood industry about 30 years or more. He started off as a tape operator in a recording studio and then kind of worked his way up the ranks. He has worked with some of the most influential companies and people like Harpo Films, Sony, Disney, TriStar, Columbia. That's just to name a few. He has so much to say. We're going to bring him onto the show right now. I hope you guys are excited. I'm really happy to have him on the show. So let's bring him on really quick. Hey, how are you, Tim?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for accepting the invite to be on the show, because this is one of the things that, you know, I think with everything that I'm doing and the type of platform I have, you are perfect for this show.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because what I like about what you do is the entrepreneurial life is, you know, what we do in entertainment, everybody, whether you're in crew or you're an actor, writer, director, whatever, everybody is an entrepreneur in some way, shape, or form. We may collect the W-2, get paid normally through payroll, but you still got to think about your career in that way.
So what really brought you, let's start off by me asking this. Is working in Hollywood, is that something you've always wanted to do? What did you start off really doing that kind of led you in that direction? And then we'll kind of get into everything you've done, what you do for people, what you've done in the industry.
Well, so the answer to your question is yes, I always wanted to do this for a living. I grew up in Southern California, and I can remember going to stage plays with my parents and looking out the back seat of their car, thinking to myself, what's behind those gates at Paramount and Universal and Fox as we were driving from the freeway to whatever theater we were going to? And I just thought to myself, I said to my dad when I was like 10, I want to work behind those gates, Dad. I want to know what's going on. And I just have always been around it. I've always been interested in it. And I love movies. Even at a young age, I'd watch the Oscars to the very bitter end. And sometimes I'd fall asleep, but because I was a kid. So I've always been interested in it.
So was it just because of movies and film? Had you met like anyone in entertainment? Were you raised in like the Hollywood area?
So I was not. I was raised in a suburb of Los Angeles, a town called Fullerton. It's the first stop on the train.
Fullerton.
Yeah, south of LA. And I just was always interested in movies. My parents took us to movies, even at a young age. We'd go to the drive-in. I can remember getting in my footy pajamas when I was really little and getting in the car, and my parents we'd go to some drive-in somewhere, and my brother and I would fall asleep in the back seat. And so it's always been a part of my life, and my parents certainly encouraged it. But as I got older, I realized whatever I was going to do, I wanted to work at HQ, whether it was cars in Detroit or media in New York or Hollywood in Los Angeles. I knew whatever I was doing, I wanted to do it at the place where the nexus of that industry. And then Hollywood was my backyard, and it just kind of happened for me. But the answer to your question is I knew no one. I did this from scratch by myself.
So how did you get started? How did you know what to do to get started? And then how did you know what part you wanted to play?
Well, the part I wanted to play was, I knew I didn't want to be in front of the camera. That was always clear to me. So that left out, directing and writing and the creative and being an actor, right? That wasn't my jam. I knew at a very young age, I wasn't that personality. And I say to all my clients, and have said for decades, if you want the most obvious idea in the room creatively, I'm your guy. But that's not going to sell in Hollywood, and you're not going to succeed doing that. So I made a decision early on that I need to pick something else. So my track was, I wanted to be a producer. But truthfully, that was just in the back of my head when I started out when I was 18. I was like, I want to produce movies. That's interesting to me. But I took a class my second semester freshman year in what I thought was going to be teaching me about how the stereo worked, because I was a music nut. I was a drummer as a kid. And to some extent into college, I was a music major. And I saw this class. It was recording engineering. And I thought, oh, I'll learn about the stereo and how that works. Well, little did I know it was actually about multi-track recording and learning how to make records. And I got an internship just because there was this woman named Martha who was also a student. She was, pretty much my contemporary, a couple years older. Yeah. And I was working the board and I was doing my thing. I was working on my thesis project. And she said, you're kind of good at this. Do you want to come work at the studio as an intern? And I went, okay, what are you talking about? And she's like, my boss, he's Dan Van Patten. He was a founding member of a band called Berlin, and he owns a studio in Orange, California. And, you want to come down and just work as an intern. And I thought, okay, I'll go do that. That sounds like fun. And I was literally, I wasn't even 19 yet. I was 18. And I was working with, some pretty heavyweight players. And I had no idea at the time. I was like, Dan Van Patten, oh, Berlin. Yeah, that was a good song. I like that band. Terry Nunn, right? Yeah. He was a drummer. And he knew this guy, Bob Brown, who was a big time engineer and a manager. He worked with Alice Cooper. And just coincidentally, I lucked into these players in the business who were real. So I learned at a really young age and early in my career, you kind of got to wade through the chaff of who's full of shit and who isn't. And those players were not full of shit. And it helped me propel my career for sure, because the next people I work with, they saw that I had worked with real people who worked in the industry. And honestly, it was just luck. But I figured it out over time. Pretty quickly, I figured out you got to work with people who are in the industry, who are working, who have connections to distribution and financing. And that was the that was the early kernel in my career where I thought to myself that I need to find these people. And that's what really helped me succeed, was ferreting out who had access and who had capital. And that was easy to figure out because they paid you and they paid on time. So
how does one, like if a new and up and coming person wanting to get in the industry, and of course I know what an entrepreneur, I know what a, when you come to people with a, when interning, you know, and I've heard about interns in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But how do you know, unless it's just trial and error, like who's really full of crap, basically? I mean, because I've heard some, even celebrities don't want to pay. And you're in the end, and you don't really know how to determine the good from the bad. I mean, or is it just like it just happens and you just struggle through it and you learn as you go along?
So the answer is that's usually most people's track. They go to, if they don't have access to somebody in the industry who can guide them to the places where the jobs exist, because this industry is a black box. It's really hard to look up on the internet. Oh, I want to be a doctor. That doesn't work. I want to work in Hollywood. Okay. How do you get the first job? So it's not something that's traditional, like being a doctor or being a lawyer or working in corporate America or whatever, working for an insurance company, answering a phone, or even at McDonald's, right? All of those jobs, you look them up on the net and you can figure out how to apply for those jobs and probably how to get into that particular industry. This isn't like that. And what most people do is they take free work, they take internships. So there's two levels of work in film production. I'm going to focus on that because that's where most of my experience exists, at least for the past 25, 30 years. So in film production, there is the level of work where you get paid, and then there's the free work, which is internships, student films, independent work. There's nothing wrong with taking that kind of work, but my advice to all of my students is do it once or twice. Don't do it for very long. And make sure that the people you're working with have cash to make product, or they have distribution, or your stuff is going to be seen. Otherwise, you're really just wasting your time. So really what I tell people is you got to work with real producers. And the way you know who's real is you research who these people are, what studio are they connected to, what financing source are they connecting to, and is their stuff being seen by people in the past 6 months or a year or 2 or 3 years. If they haven't done any of that, they made a movie, it went to the festival circuit and never got bought, move on. Do it once or twice. Do it for a short period of time. Great to add to your credits so that you have some credibility and something on a piece of paper to explain, yeah, I've done this. I kind of know the drill. But you really need to get up into the big leagues. And in order to do that, you got to get paid. And that's the trigger.
Is it more who you know than versus sometimes your skill or your experience?
It is 100% who you know. You can be unskilled and continue to get work. You can be untalented and continue to get work. But if you don't know the right people to get you that work, who the hiring managers are, where the money is, it is a business of referrals and connections. And the day you stop networking is the day your career begins to atrophy. So you're constantly selling. That's the other thing. As an entrepreneur and in this business, you're always selling. If you don't like sales, don't be an entrepreneur, and don't come work in Hollywood, because you're always selling yourself, and you're always selling some kind of product.
So I'm assuming that when you say it's networking, it's also knowing where to be. I mean, for me, I network. Obviously, it's a totally different type of networking than obviously networking in Hollywood, because it's like, I would assume you have to know where to be, and you're connecting with the right people that you're networking with.
Correct. And that's part of one of the techniques that I teach to my students is it's knowing who to network with and who they work with so that you can work your way up. Obviously, let's say you want to work on some big show and Joss Whedon is your guy. I mean, he's been in the news recently, but I'm just using him because he comes to mind. He's your guy, or Aaron Sorkin, or whoever you pick, right? Are you going to get a meeting with Aaron Sorkin? Likely not. Are you going to get a meeting with Aaron Sorkin's assistant, or the writing assistant, or even a mid-level writer that Aaron Sorkin works with, or a researcher? Yes, you can. You can connect with those people. You can network with them. And the only way you're going to know who those people are is to do the research and map it out. You got to figure out what vertical do you want to work in, right? You want to work in reality, features, television, dramatic television, sitcom. You kind of got to start with that vertical and then work backward from that. What are my favorite shows? What do I love? And then you just build a database and learn the industry and learn who's in the industry and in that vertical. That's super important. And that's one of the things we teach, right? Is how do you get connected to this? How do you figure out who to talk to and who not to talk to?
So is it harder to get into some, I'd say into some other, like you have some of your major networks, or like as you said, you've worked in like, with worked alongside Disney and Harpo with Oprah and, Columbia. Is it trying to get into one of those specific types of film industries, or is it harder to get to some, or is it who that gets you into that? Because is that totally separate from who trying to work with these major players?
Actually, it's both. So the people, you're not going to connect with Sony Pictures. You're not going to connect with Warner Brothers or Netflix or Hulu or whatever you want to work in, right? Mm-hmm. But those are big corporate structures that have people. And those executives in development and in production have companies that work for them. They have overhead deals, they have first look deals, whatever they are. Somehow those production companies are connected to those entities. So you have to map out the industry to understand who's connected to what studios, and then start to do some research about what shows they're making and who works on them.
That's a lot.
It is. And it's complicated, but it's not mysterious. It's just not that. It's not like, okay, I want to go do a job for General Electric. I want to be an electrical engineer, right? I want to build turbine blades for jets. Those are easy jobs to figure out. This industry isn't. It's a black box. It's opaque. It's hard to understand and figure out. But the kernel of it is who's distributing product and who has money to make that product for distribution. I'm not saying everything needs to be a money job, but without money, film production does not get made. Plain and simple.
Do you remember your first assignment where you said to yourself, I'm on my way, or I've made it? It's like that actor getting that first script and they like got that part and you're like, okay, now this is opening doors for me.
Yes, it actually was. I got my first job working at Columbia and TriStar. I was a media planner, actually. I was an assistant media planner even. I was working for an ad agency, a company called McCann Erickson. And I wound up working in movie marketing because I got a degree from a state school in Fullerton. I grew up in Fullerton and I went to school there. I graduated with a four-year degree in advertising specifically, only for no reason other than I wanted out, but I wanted a degree, right? What's my quickest path? And that happened to be advertising. So I made a list of made a list of record companies I could go work for in marketing, and I made a list of studios I could go work for in marketing. And I sent out my cover letter to all the record labels, and I got one back from an executive at A&M called Rob Gold. And he wrote on my cover letter and he mailed it back to me. He said, "Tim, although you sound like a bright guy, I could never consider hiring someone who can't write a flawless cover letter." And I had 2 typos in it. And I went, okay, record business is out. Let's fix the typos and send them to the movie studios. And I did. And my resume got handed from the executive I mailed it to, who was the head of the department, to the woman who wound up hiring me, Lisa Michelli. And she gave me my first job. And I worked on big features. I worked on Basic Instinct, Terminator 2, Total Recall, The Doors, giant movies. And that made an impression on the next place I went to go work when I got a job as a PA, because I didn't want to work in advertising. I kept getting promoted. And I was about to take this big job that was going to triple my income. And I thought to myself, if I take this job, I'm stuck in it. And this isn't what I want to do. So I went to go take a job as a PA on a TV show called Dream On. But that job, to answer your question, that Lisa Michelli hired me for as an assistant in the advertising department at Columbia Pictures, that made my career blow up from there. And that was the quintessential moment for sure.
So knowing that you've worked alongside even Harpo with Oprah, and so obviously you've met very influential people from producing to writing to acting. Who would you say was that you liked working alongside, that you would say that they're I guess you'd say that they're who they are, and that we see I say as real, I guess, as you can say they are, as transparent.
Well, that's a tough one, because so many public-facing personalities, what you read about or hear about or see about them is it's a fiction. It's our job. It's what we do. We create facades around everything. Nothing's real behind the front end, right? So my experience, I'll give you Oprah Winfrey as an example. I ran physical production at Harpo Films in LA, which we were responsible for making feature film and long form 2-hour television for ABC and for Disney. I didn't have anything to do with the TV show in Chicago. I worked and lived in LA, and I ran physical there for 5 years. And I was lucky enough many times to meet and work directly with Oprah. And here's a woman you see on screen who's vivacious and curious and in your face in a really positive way, right? But in real life, man, she's down to earth and she is smart. She's mercurial. She's a loquacious reader. I say loquacious because a friend of mine used to say I read books like liquid. Although loquacious has nothing to do with being liquid. But anyway, she reads a tremendous amount. And, you know, what you see on TV isn't really Oprah Winfrey. She's in her head. It's all working. The gears are grinding. You can see the smoke coming off her head, right? But she is listening and paying attention. And I think that's the common thread with all of the personalities that I liked working with, who I learned the most from, was their public persona is one thing. But behind the scene, who they are and how they operate and how they function, those are two very different things. And you can't take seriously what you see on the television and you read in the media. You have to know the person and meet the person. And every single one of those who I would say that I admired and I learned the most from, they were intellectually curious, they were super smart, and they listened. And maybe even in reverse order. They listened more than they talked.
Is there such a real thing called a casting couch?
Unfortunately, it has existed for a long time. Yeah. And if you're a young woman and you encounter that, I wrote a blog article a couple of years ago about where casting actually happens. Casting doesn't happen at some guy's house. It doesn't happen in a hotel room. And if you go to one of those places, you're likely to see a dick out. And you got to be careful, right? It happens in commercial environments. It happens at a studio. It happens with a lot of other people around. You're not going to be by yourself. If you're by yourself, you're at someone's home in a hotel room, go home. Unless that's what you want to do, then do whatever the hell you want. You're an adult. But the casting couch did exist. It's a lot less common now. Me Too certainly has a profound impact on the way that a lot of the idiots in my business have operated for a long time. The Hollywood hug. I mean, producers would go over to actors, pretty young girls, and just hug them, and they're just feeling them up. And it was just so disgusting. I hated it. I don't do the Hollywood hug because of it. I don't like it. I never have, and I can't stand when other men in my industry do it. It makes me sick.
So I know that you actually, from the little research that I've done, and if you don't mind me sharing, so I know that you really help people in understanding how the industry actually works, and everything what's behind the scenes of being in Hollywood, how to get in the business, what to look out for. So I was hoping we can kind of really jump into that and talk about that a bit, if you don't mind. I was going through your website, so I hope you don't mind that I bring that up.
No, I'm glad to talk about it.
How you wanted to turn this into really a business and helping others.
Well, so I started blogging about the industry going on 2 years ago, I guess. And the genesis of the idea came from, and I mean, it's a little dark, but nonetheless, I'll talk a little bit about it briefly. But there was a woman, I think her name was Christy Johnson, and she came to Hollywood. She was from the Midwest somewhere, I think. And she got into a casting session, and the guy she met with wasn't real, and he wound up killing her and dumped her body in Laurel Canyon. And I was driving. I had a house in Laurel Canyon at the time, and I remember driving across Mulholland, coming back from a meeting somewhere in the valley. And I was driving down my street, and I see this helicopter, and I'm like, what is that? Well, I found out a couple days later what had happened. And I thought to myself, if I could have talked to that woman, I could have explained to her that what this guy was telling you was nonsense, and you should just run screaming from him. So It wasn't, and that was in like 2001 or two, I think that incident happened. I was working for Oprah at the time. It might have even been a little earlier. But I remember thinking to myself, one person could have whispered in her ear, and I'm not the only guy. It could have been hundreds of us who said to her, man, this guy's a train wreck, get away. Right. And we possibly could have saved her life. So that was the genesis of it. And I've been thinking about it for probably 15 or 20 years. And I'm more like 15. And I thought to myself, what can I do? And that's where this website came from. And the purpose of it really is just to help people get informed about the industry and how it actually works, from investors to cast to crew. And when I say cast, I mean creatives, writers, directors, actors, all of them. So many people just they hear about what works and don't really understand how the industry functions. So I started blogging about it. That led to, well, a couple of people had asked me about where to work, assistants who I encounter in my client work and some of those stuff I do. The shows I've worked on, I hear from young women who want to be actors. So like, what do I do? How do I get, I don't know where to go talk to. And I started giving them advice about how I would do it and how, what the people in the room who are actually deciding about hiring someone, how are those decisions made? What travels through their head, right? So I just started giving advice, and those people started to get work. So then I built a program around the idea of, well, wait a minute, I can actually help these people. And what it does is it puts people through a 6-week program who are young, either coming into the industry to learn about it, or they're leveling up in their career. They got a job as an intern or an assistant, but they can't get out of it. They're stuck at a particular level. How do you level up into the next phase? And it's about doing that guided research, picking your vertical, those kinds of things about how the industry functions and how to get yourself into the next level, or actually into the industry.
So it really isn't just about most people that I would think, obviously not in entertainment, not an actor or anything like that, is that you think, I take acting classes, I go and take, and hopefully get a part. You really have to there's more involved in just getting a part. It's the business aspect of it.
100%. So this is a business. This is a multi-tens of billion-dollar industry. And in order for you to play in it, you have to understand two things. Number one, you're a cog in a wheel, and you're low level. You're starting out at entry level. You're never going to come into the industry and go from entry level to directing a big feature, or even directing a feature, right? So as a writer, director, or an actor, it begins with you getting trained. If you're a writer, you have to understand story, you have to understand structure, and you have to understand how the actual physicality of doing the job works. And I think writing is probably, of all the creative arts in Hollywood, probably one of the most difficult parts of the work that we all do. Directing, probably the second. Actually, probably the simplest, and acting is probably the most difficult, and the second most difficult. But you got to get trained. Actors have to understand how to do the job, how to audition. An actor's job is auditioning. An actor's job isn't reading lines in front of a camera. That's where you get paid. Your job is actually auditioning. And just because an audition doesn't turn out for you doesn't mean you haven't moved the ball forward in some way. But you have to get trained to start doing that job. And then as far as directors go, you got to know what you want to shoot. You got to know how you're going to do it, where you're going to put a camera, and what you want these actors to do, and why a scene even exists, and what's the purpose of a scene, and what's the arc of a story, and how is this scene and this actor and this line pushing this story forward. If it doesn't, can I abandon it? Can I think about cutting it out later? Those kinds of things. So you have to get trained. And then once you've figured that out and you have some basic training, then you have to start mapping out the industry and where you're going to go work, who you want to work with, what kind of product you want to make. And what I say to young people all the time is, you need to get pigeonholed. Everyone talks about, I don't want to get pigeonholed. Well, stop it. You have to get pigeonholed. This is a business of copycats. A movie works, and you'll see 10 just like it that follow it. The reason is because it's a business trying to replicate lightning in a bottle. And when lightning in a bottle happens, you're just going to keep making the same thing over and over until it stops working. So you have to get pigeonholed, and the industry thinks in terms of verticals and buckets. I know this actor works in this bucket. I know what to do with them. And if you work in 3 or 4 different buckets, an executive will go, wait a minute, but he or she, I want this bucket, and they do these other 2, but what is it? What are they doing? I'm confused. Next. That conversation you have to try to put away by working in a vertical, getting pigeonholed, and stay in it. Doesn't mean you got to do that for the rest of your life, but you got to be strategic about how you get out of that pigeonhole if you have a desire to move on to something different.
So how do you even know that you have, and I'm sure that picking or choosing the right management, because people seem to always, I see this a lot, looking for management.
Yeah.
How do you even know how to choose the right management? Because I would assume that that's a part of their, I would assume that would be a part of their job, having the connections to get you where you want to be and getting you the information that you need to, so, and knowing that you're managed well, because I hear a lot of people are taking for their money in Hollywood and they're going bankrupt, and they do. I mean, you know, I just hear this on, you know, on the news and stuff like that, and how so many celebrities and entertainers or people go broke producing a movie because they didn't have the right things in place or the right management in place.
Right. There's a lot to unpack there. So let me start. I'll come back to the manager piece in a minute. Let me start with how the industry works. First of all, if you come to this industry, you're going to pay to learn how to be a writer, director, and actor. That's going to happen. And if you don't pay for it, you're likely not going to get very good training. And it doesn't have to be NYU, USC, UCLA, 200 grand, nothing like that. You can be something as little as $600 or $800 for a class to learn about structure, to learn about how to light, hold a camera, whatever you're trying to focus on, right? There's lots of that. So you have to pay to get educated and to develop those skills. But everything else in this business is free. It doesn't cost money to raise money. It doesn't cost money to take auditions. It doesn't cost money to sit in front of executives who are development, who work in development, who are buying scripts. It doesn't cost anything. Managers don't cost money. It costs some money to do headshots. It costs some money to register your material. So if you're a writer, you're not getting ripped off. It might cost you some money to direct a short, but you know, if you can direct a short film for $500 or $600 and find quality and really find good people to work with, so you can demonstrate your skills, right? So that's number one. It doesn't cost money to work in Hollywood. In Hollywood, you make money. If you're not getting paid, you're getting fucked. An old business partner of mine used to say that all the time. And it's absolutely true. And I go back to what I said earlier. It's okay to do internships and do free work or low paid work for a short period of time, just to dip into a particular network to find out whether or not they're full of shit or they're real. That's okay. Don't do it for too long, and don't work for free forever, right? Do it for a couple of projects or a couple of network opportunities and move on. That's number one. You make money in this business. You don't spend money. And that's important to understand. The other piece is finding a manager. If you're a writer, director, or an actor, there is no way you're going to ever get into the room, except maybe actors, into the casting room. But there's no way you're going to get into a room without representation. It's just that simple. No one will read your screenplay who's in a serious role to buy material. And the reason is there's too much opportunity for litigation. So they have to just basically say, no unsolicited material, moving on, send it with your representation. Representation is a manager or an attorney or an agent. Those are the three opportunities you have. So picking the manager and or agent when you're young, that's a tough one because you don't really pick, they pick you. And the way you get noticed is by, as a writer, entering competitions, as a director, putting your stuff on YouTube and showing your material around, getting into festivals, doing shorts, doing feature films. And I say to directors, if you have enough money to make a short, make a feature film out of it. Turn it into something that's full length that you can actually sell. There's no market for short films. Unless you want to demonstrate something to the creative community that you have a particular skill, don't bother making shorts, actually make a full length film. But anyway, you need to figure out how to get connected to managers. And the way you do that is by competitions and making yourself known to them. They typically won't take your material unsolicited. Now, the back door to that is you go network with the assistants that work at the agencies. And there aren't many of them. There are 5 or 6. It's Creative Artists. It's Endeavor. It's the Morris office, which I'm cratering on the agencies at the moment because I can't pull them out of my head at the moment. But the names are big. We all know them. It's ICM, William Morris, Endeavor, and CAA. Those are the 3 big agencies. Under them are the sort of mini smaller agencies, you know, like Gersh and some of the other ones like it. They have great talent. There's a lot of assistants that work there for the agents and managers who exist in those spaces. Connect with those assistants, figure out who they are, and just take an informational with them. Find out how they got the job, and then get to know that person. And then when you do an informational, you're just going to ask them a simple question. How'd you get into this business? What do you do? What do you love? What do you want to do? You're never going to pitch them your story. You're not going to ask them to come to your showcase, read your script, or watch your short. Do not do it. You're just there to get yourself in front of people so that you can demonstrate that you're relevant, and that you're smart, and that you love the business and you want to get into it. And then maybe one day you can say to them, hey, I wrote this script. Will you read it? I'm looking for representation, right? That's the sort of backdoor way to do it if you're not going to enter competitions. Again, it's about networking and getting connected with people. So super important. And like I said, you don't really pick which agency, but here's one thing I will say about managers and agents and lawyers. You know, a manager, an agent, or a lawyer is legit and has connections to the executives in development who can buy material, whether it's buy actors, and that's more casting directors, whether they can buy scripted material, or directors, and that's development. That's more of a development track. The people who are real and are connected to those places will get you into meetings. If they can't get you into a meeting, they likely don't have a connection to the industry.
So then a manager, they're getting actually paid by getting you work.
Correct. Agents and managers get paid by getting you work.
Is that the same for publicists? How different do publicists work? Because it seems like everybody, I see all over the place, PR agents and publicists. And it's like everybody, I don't know if everybody has to have one, but that seems to be the case. Like everybody should have one.
Yes, at some point in your career when you're making money and you need to have that thing handled, right? So the financial structure of agents, managers, and lawyers is typically a percentage of what you earn, and that aggregate percentage can range anywhere from 15 to 20 or 25%, right? If you have 3 people, an agent, a manager, and a lawyer working for you, which I don't think you need all those people working on commission, they typically get paid a commission. And the commission, in my opinion, should really be somewhere in the range of 10 or 15%. And then that aggregate percentage gets carved up between all the parties that participate in it. Then there is business management, which is the actual functioning of your business. And when you get to a particular point, you'll be making big money, something over $150,000 or $200,000 and upwards of 7 figures. You will have a business management focus, which will deal with the actual business side of your life. Because when you get to that level, you're not working as an individual anymore. You're working as what's called a loan out, which is a corporate structure. And then there's a publicity part. And those are kind of the 4 or 5 areas. So going back to your original question, publicist, yes, you need it when you get to a particular level. So when you see all these layers starting to come into your career and your life, and you're getting complicated and a lot of stuff's happening and firing off at the right place for you, that's when it's time for a publicist. And they should be on your team and not necessarily on the studio or the financier's team. That's the reason they exist. And that'll come at the behest of your agent or manager. I see often young people coming to the industry trying to find a publicist because they're going to create heat. And I say in quotes, heat about themselves. It doesn't work. No publicist worth a shit is going to take that work, number one. And number two, if you have to pay a publicist to do that, then you probably should start spending that time and money making content that people in the industry can evaluate and find and decide that you're worth hiring.
So do you believe in that saying it's better to have some publicity than no publicity? Because I've heard that it's bad publicity, but it's better to be out there than not to be out there.
I do subscribe to that. At the end of the day, we're in the business of creating. So take a step back, right? Ultimately, we're in the business of creating content such that people are interested enough to part with their money. There's plenty of free content out there. In order to get people to pay for your content, you have to make good content that they want to buy, right? And good is subjective. Some people love Terrence Malick. Some people love Spike Lee. Some people love Steven Soderbergh or whoever, right? It just depends. So putting aside what's good or bad, that's up to you. Everybody makes their own decisions. But good is, in the generic sense, is material people will pay money to see. So that's our business, right? And and in doing that, we have to create a lot of awareness about our product. And if you can't create awareness in traditional channels that where you're spending money on advertising or publicity or whatever, and if you can get bad publicity for whatever reason, it creates awareness about your product and could compel people to spend money on your product, right? Do I advocate creating bad awareness for yourself? Probably not. Would I say to Paris Hilton, hey man, that sex tape you made 20 years ago, let's put it out and see if you can make a shit ton of money? I would never have that argument with anybody in that space. But if bad publicity is your lot, you might as well turn it into something that can make money for yourself or the people who you're working for.
So if I were, which I mean I'm not, but how would somebody come to you, like if they wanted to learn more about the in any avenue? Maybe they want to be behind the scenes and camera, or they wanted to, aside from being an actor, anything in the Hollywood industry. How could they come to you and you can direct them and say, you know, this is how I can get you started, you know, to direct you? What type of people do you accept?
So I sort of have two verticals, right? One is creatives, writer, director, actors, producers. Those are the four people in the creative arts. That's one vertical. And then the other is crew. So as far as those two work, I pretty much take anybody who's in one of those two verticals. I also work with investors as far as how to invest in projects and not wind up getting ripped off. But there's not a lot of that out there. It's a pretty small pool of people. They can always connect with me on my website. At the bottom, there's a ask me a question field, and you just got to enter your name and email address and whatever your question is. And we'll work with anybody who wants to gain or learn how to gain access to the industry. I have a couple of criteria with the people I want to work with, which is you have to be dedicated, what I call movie stupid. If you're not movie stupid, then this business isn't for you. And you have to be dedicated and interested in making film. If you don't like entertainment, or you're not movie stupid, this work is hard work. And you're going to look around and go, God, I'm making okay money, but is it really worth giving up this much of my life? You know, I didn't have a kid until I was 45 because I was chasing movies around the world for the 20 years. And I wanted to have a family. I just knew that if I was going to work in film production and have a career in Hollywood, that wasn't going to happen for me, and have a stable home life with my daughter or my son, whatever that wound up being a daughter. But I wasn't going to have a stable relationship doing family and a career in film. So I chose movies, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm glad I did, but it's a particular life, and it's hard. It's hard work. So the people I take are people who are movie stupid, love movies. And as long as they understand that I'm not going to get you a job, I'm going to show you how the industry works. I'm going to give you some skills and some training about who to talk to, where to go, how to do the research about the industry and how it works and functions and the people in it, so that you know who to connect with. That's really the work we do.
So when you say people are looking to invest in the industry,
yeah,
and what's the definition of like investing, and how investing in just like starting their own company, and or investing in film, and investing in, like, they find writers where they want to invest in their work and produce something?
In its traditional sense, there are people with a pile of money. It's what I call the bored rich guy. It's someone with a pile of money who wants to come to Hollywood and talk about it at the dinner table with their friends in the Midwest, right? It's like, yeah, I'm invested in a movie. It's like, okay, that's great, but do you really want to lose money doing that? Or do you want to try to build an enterprise and invest in a project that makes sense and that could possibly earn you a return? There's no guarantees. It's entertainment. The studios lose money on projects, not all the time, but they do once in a while make something that doesn't make money. It loses money. And that ratio is about 10%. You know, you always hear about 80% lose money and 20 do make a lot of money that covers it. That's bullshit. The fact is, about 5 or 10% of the product that the studios push out into the world ultimately wind up making money for them over a span of about 7 or 10 years. But as an investor, investing in a particular project. So I do consult with content creators as far as how do you get and typically the content creators I work with are creators who are already making money. They figured out how to generate demand and convert that demand into cash so that they're making a consistent income, anywhere from, $5,000 to $10,000 or more a month. I work with them about getting focused, building systems, and then targeting your audience so you can scale from where you currently are making, anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000, $120,000 a year up to deep six figures and into seven figures. How do you do that? You can't do that one person at a mic trying to figure it out, or whatever your creative content business is.
Right.
We work with them about how to expand that out.
So now obviously, we're still kind of in COVID.
Yes.
And has within the last year, COVID really affected the industry? Because now I see so many more celebrities that I've never seen before. Really, I mean, I've seen a lot of celebrities, but you see now so many on social media more than ever, and a lot of them are sponsoring more than ever, like sponsoring some product or something like that. And so I don't know if it's just coincidental, or is it because a lot has stopped from production because, this whole, keeping 6 feet apart kind of thing, and everything being shut down. I don't know if that's just a coincidence, or has Hollywood really not been affected much at all?
Oh, Hollywood's been affected dramatically. So I would say, and personally in my business and the clients who are making traditional network and studio fare, those clients, their revenues are down 90% from 2019. I have clients that would turn 20 to 30 million a year in aggregate top line revenue, going from 20 to 30 to making 2 or 4 million in a year. When I say make, I mean that's top line revenue. Obviously, there's costs associated with that, and the margins are anywhere from 10 to 30%, depending on the business they're in. But top line, yeah, the business is dramatically, as far as production goes, is down dramatically. Actors and other personalities making sort of expanding in the anecdotal evidence you're talking about. So I think it's 2 reasons. Number one, yes, it's probably partially to COVID because they're not making a living and they got to find a way to generate cash flow to cover their nut. Because, living and doing that job is not inexpensive. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it's not inexpensive. So they got to make money. They got to pay to put food on the table, pay the bills. And if they're not in production, they can't get paid, right? Mm-hmm. So they're doing it probably out of necessity to some extent. And the other thing is there's just platform after platform after platform that has made these things possible. I can't remember the name of the company that does it, but they will have, if you want to have Mel Gibson or Bradley Cooper record, I don't even know if they're on the platform, but nonetheless, using big names, if you want to have them record a greeting for your friend or your family, a happy birthday, Zoom.
Cameo.
Thank you. Cameo is the company, correct?
Yeah.
So Cameo will get something recorded for you, for your friends, from a personality for anywhere from $10,000 down to like $100, right? For real people. I mean, Dennis Rodman will do it. Dennis Rodman will come into the opening of a door, and I love him. I think he's amazing. He cracks me up, but he does it for like $100. He's like, yeah, bring them on. I'll do as many as you want, right? So I don't know if he still does, but those kinds of platforms have made this whole industry become a lot more accessible, where in the past it really was controlled by the gatekeepers of their agents or managers. Mm-hmm. And we hear it all the time about other industries, and entertainment is no exception. Entertainment, as we have known it for the past 50 years, is dead, bar none, full stop. It's over. People worked in entertainment. Producer clients of mine used to make $1.25 million a year making movies. They're lucky to make $250,000 to $300,000. It is a high volume, low margin, low cost, or low revenue business now. And the tech guys have come in and turned analog dollars into digital pennies. That is just the reality of our business, and it is changing, and it will never be the same. That doesn't mean it's not changing for the good, because I think it is. It's making it a lot more accessible to a lot more people, but you got to understand there's 2 things that make movies work. Number 1, good content. And number 2, making awareness about your product, either through publicity or marketing or the people that you hire to be in front of the camera. Simple as that.
I was going to, kind of, I wanted to open the door to about, it used to be, or maybe it still is, but it seems like it used to be, you had to have the big name celebrity to make the dollars. But now in many films, it seems like it's these people that you really don't know and that you've never heard of. And then they come out with this amazing film. And, that's, and they're making millions at it. I mean, their box office hits. So I don't know if it's just because that's all coincidence, but it seems so much more common. And the whole YouTube digital thing, you can be, not that I'm not anybody, but really no one knows of you one day. Right. And then 2 days later, everybody knows you.
Sure. The digital platforms have made all of that possible. I mean, I have my gripes with those platforms, which is very simple. We create free content for internet millionaires or billionaires to make shit tons of money, and they throw scraps at us for like a few pennies for advertising if you aggregate an audience. I think it's bullshit. But put that aside, it is a business. They've done really well, and I can't fault them for doing what I would do, which is try to make as much money as I possibly could, right? I don't blame them for that. But as content creators, at some point, don't we have to sit around and say, wait a minute, we're making these douchebags a shit ton of money. What about me? How can I be selling directly to consumers? So I think that's the future of our business, is direct to consumer from the creator, without the intermediaries, without all these other channels stealing 5, 10, 60% of your gross revenue and pocketing that cash, and actually putting the money in the creator's content, or creator's pocket. Mm-hmm. I will say, having managed creatives for, at least since I started doing it for Oprah in 1996, creatives, they create and they make a lot of ideas. And honestly, a lot of them are terrible. And that's what a good executive does, is they weed through the terrible ideas and find the great ones and figure out how to lay into that and actually make money on the ones that are great. That's the important skill that an executive has. So if you're a creative, surround yourself with one partner who can ferret out the good ideas, even though you may argue over what's good and what isn't. Find a partner who has that skill, who understands the industry or understands the landscape of the buyers, and say, okay, this is a good idea. We need to lay into this. And these other ones still need a little more work, and they're a little bit half-baked. And as I say to all of my clients, if you have 2 or more partners, I don't want you. If you got one partner or you're a solo entrepreneur, I'll work with you. But when you have more than one partner in your business, and by the way, there are many ways to compensate people fairly who are part of the creative process and the actual business without making them partners. So, I'm not saying that partners, everybody needs to be a partner. Everybody shouldn't be participants. I'm saying you only need one partner. Every business I've ever seen that has more than one partner in it, always, in every single situation, and I've seen dozens of them, they all fail. They all collapse because of politics between the partners.
I can believe that. Yeah. What would you say is the most lucrative position to play in the entertainment industry? People seem to think I would think it's being a celebrity, but I think if you're not always on top, then I just hope you save your money and invested well. But I don't know that. What would you say would the most lucrative part to play in Hollywood? Would it be writing, producing, owning your own studio, or would that be more risky?
There's a lot there. So I think, obviously the place to make all the money is being in front of the camera, right? If you have access and you're the personality and you can create demand around yourself, that's honestly where the money comes from. And the closer you can get to talent, the more money and the more power you're going to have. It's just a simple fact. But that has a short window. And it has a limited, it's like being a ball player. It's like, how many basketball players can play on a team? Well, 5 at a time. And how many do they allow? 10 or 11, right? So it's a limited number of people. And it is a bit of a lottery to some extent, right? But you don't have to be a huge star to make really good money. I mean, I know some sort of B level, and I don't mean that in the pejorative. They don't work, and they're not as huge as the big names, right? They might make 7, 8 figures. I mean, deep 6 and low 7 figures a year making content. And there's nothing wrong with that. So being the in front of the camera, or the person responsible for creating whatever content that you're building that people are buying. Whether you build an infrastructure or a business around that, that's really your own decision. It's up to you. You can go work for the studios. You can go work for a distributor or a financier. Obviously, the more power you have, the more money you're going to make, but you're going to have less control. At the end of the day, you're spending their money. And if they don't like you having blonde hair, they're going to tell you flat out, I don't want you to have blonde hair, so change your fucking hair color. And if you say, no, I want to have blonde hair, and you continue, I'm using a ridiculous example, by the way.
Yeah.
If you continue to push the point of view that you've got to have blonde hair for this particular thing, eventually they're going to go, you know what? This person's a pain in the ass. They're in the life is too difficult category, and word spreads around town and you don't get work, and all of a sudden you can't be seen out there. And we've seen lots of people like that. So
there is a such thing as being blacklisted. And
100%. I call it actor, writer, director, producer jail. So I'm going to give you an example of an actress who you saw everywhere a few years ago. She started out in Grey's Anatomy. I mean, that's really where she blew up. It was Katherine Heigl. You went from Katherine Heigl making Grey's Anatomy to making movies all over the place. I never worked with her, so I don't know anything about her. I just know that she kind of disappeared. And she disappeared because the executives in town were going around saying, so I just got off a Katherine Heigl movie. I have a Katherine Heigl movie that just crossed my desk. What was your experience of her? And they call around town to people who worked with her in the past. And if she gets a bad rap from the past producer, the past 2 or 3, all of a sudden those producers are going to go, okay, I don't want to work with her. I don't know if this happened to her, whether or not it did. I just know that she kind of disappeared. So I'm using that as an example. Right. Someone might pick up the phone and go, hey, well, it's Katherine Heigl. She's a pain in the ass. Move on. Go find something different. Because there's 1,000 projects and 1,000 other actors out there who can do the same job. So I wouldn't say it's a formal blacklist, because I think that's probably illegal. But the fact is, if you're a pain in the ass, word gets around town really fast, and you're probably going to have a hard time finding work.
I've also noticed that quite a few celebrities are now producing and writing themselves, and retiring early, and doing other business ventures. So that's why I asked the question of what's lucrative, or just because they're not being seen. A lot of celebrities aren't being seen or getting the parts that they want to have, so they rather write it and produce it themselves, and or have somebody in place do that type of that genre of that film that they once couldn't do. Do you find that being common, that more actors are becoming writers and producers and doing their own thing and steering away from just being hired and casted? Because now I hear some actors don't even have to interview anymore. They're just chosen.
Yeah, they don't audition at some point.
Yeah.
Well, the not auditioning thing has come around. It's been around for quite some time. I can remember us wanting, I forget who it was. It was some movie we were making at Harpo, and I want to say we were looking at Robert Downey Jr. before he had done the Iron Man films. In fact, he was a little nuclear at the time because he was a drug addict. And I remember calling the agent. The agent's like, look, if there's not an offer, a real offer for $1 million on the table, we won't even bring it to him. So that stuff has happened for a long time. It hasn't been, it's been around forever, which is, look, if you want my talent, they're not going to audition. You either make an offer or you move on to someone else.
Wow.
So auditioning does go away at some point once you become a known entity and the industry has some value in your skill. And that's really 100% perception. But the idea that that actors are starting to do everything, some of that is just controlling their own destiny and understanding that, Bradley Cooper is a brand, Lady Gaga is a brand. These personalities are a thing that has value, and they're going to monetize that value, as much as I dislike that word, but they're going to turn that value into cash wherever they can, as fast as they can, and as much as they can, because that window of opportunity is very short for people in front of the camera. And I think it's short because people's attention people get bored really fast with the same trick over and over. And the people who last, like Madonna, for 30 or 40 years, they last because they're constantly reinventing themselves. Yeah. So I think that's a lot of it. And I think, and the industry allows it now, where it didn't used to. It used to be, when I started, you were either a writer, you were a director, or you were a producer. You never did all of them. And actors never did any of them. You know, you basically showed up, you did your lines, and if you didn't do them well, you didn't get the next job. You showed up prepared and you did a good job. Nowadays, it's completely different. And I think that's great. I don't think people should be siloed and pigeonholed into doing one particular thing, and they should be allowed to control their career and their destiny. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I mean, it's a lot to know about Hollywood, but my assumption then is that because of everything that you're sharing, you help people brand similar to, you know, Lady Gaga and how Madonna, I've always said Madonna is always remaking themselves.
Yeah.
So people who can come to you and you're showing, you know, not just be a part of the industry, like, you know, be the brand. So people, you can monetize yourself and make money.
Yeah, that's an important element. And it's not just Hollywood anymore. Like you said, you brought up YouTube and other kinds of platforms, you know, and not even just those, but even doing your own thing. I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow is an example with Goop of someone who has gone on to do something else. That started because she was a personality in Hollywood. But
Yeah.
Tory Burch is an example of a woman who was nothing, who was nobody before she turned herself into a billionaire in less than a decade. That did not happen 20 years ago. You know, it does now because of the internet, and you can reach consumers directly. And I think that's an important piece to take. That's an important lesson we learn here in Hollywood. What I say about people say, how is Hollywood different than most other industries? The only way it's different is that we're working and making decisions at scale and at speed all the time. In other words, we read a piece of material, we make a decision about whether or not to push it forward, where to take it, where to try to sell it, or where to finance it. We do that in a matter of about 3 hours. Whereas, you know, General Electric or Boeing might take 3 years, or the car industry automobile might take 3 years to figure out where the industry is, what's going on, and where they want to lay in and apply capital into a particular product, right? We do this branding, decision-making, evaluation, analysis, execution in a matter of days or weeks, and then move on to the next thing or continue pushing that thing that we found success with. So that's the thing that we do really well in Hollywood. All executives who rise to a particular level or above a particular level, you have to have that skill. You learn it over time. And taking that skill and translating it into other businesses and industries and other silos outside of Hollywood that are successfully built a business that need to expand their brand and work outside of it is a skill. And that is something that we do a lot of with our clients, is identifying what's their business, where's the money come from, what's the brand, and how do we extend that? And we bring people to the table who are experts at that. I'm not. But I have a couple of people who I use who I think are exceptional designers and brand, I call them brand applicators. It's not a great term, but they can apply their knowledge to a particular brand and expand it out from there.
So before we close the show, because you have a lot of information to share, I want to make sure that our listeners, if you are watching, you should be able to find out where you can find and connect with Tim, as well as go to our website. You can watch the whole interview all over again, as well as connect with him, and or on our YouTube channel. If you're not listening on one of your very favorite podcasts, how can I connect with you?
The best place is to go to timtortora.com, and my last name is Tortora. It's really simple. And at the bottom, there's a Ask Me a Question. And you can just ping me there. It'll get to my desk, or it'll get to my admin, and then they get forwarded on to me. And then we'll respond back and see if there's anything we can help you with.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show, because you have provided a lot of information, but I'm sure not even a lot of information. There's still so much to offer and to give. And I hope that we did you do justice for being on the show. I appreciate you and appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I love this business. I love content. I love entertainment. And I would love to do it for as long as I can. It's fun.
And to everybody who is listening and has been supporting our show, thank you so much for watching the Entrepreneur Live Show. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out the replay video by either going to the YouTube channel, Entrepreneur Live Show, and or the webpage, entrepreneurliveshow.com, and you can hear it over and over again. Or make sure that you subscribe on your very, very, very favorite podcast platform. Again, we are here with Tim Tortora. Make sure you check him out. There's so much to learn. And we will see you guys next time on the next interview segment. Bye now. Thanks for watching, everybody.